Krishna was born in a tense historical period preceding a devastating war. The warring factions built up so many weapons that the burden on the earth became unbearable. Finally, the goddess of earth took the form of a cow and prayed to Lord Brahma for relief. Lord Brahma called all the demigods to the shore of the milk ocean to hear Mother Earth and to worship the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Vishnu. Lord Brahma fell into trance, reciting the Vedic hymns known as the Purusa Sukta, and heard the voice of Lord Vishnu. Then he announced, "O demigods, hear from me the words of God. He is aware of the distress on earth and wants you demigods to incarnate as sons and daughters in the Yadu dynasty. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna, will personally appear as the son of Vasudeva. Therefore you will all have the benediction of joining the eternal pastimes of Lord Krishna." Lord Brahma consoled the cow and sent her home, then returned to his planet, Brahmaloka. The demigods then began to take birth in the Yadu dynasty, awaiting the appearance of Lord Krishna. The members of the Yadu dynasty, headed by Vasudeva and Devaki, along with their friends, relatives, and well-wishers, were all demigods. The residents of Vrindavana, headed by King Nanda, Queen Yashoda, and Queen Rohini, were also demigods. King Kamsa was another relative in the family, however he was not a demigod. He usurped the throne of his father, Ugrasena, and put him in prison. When Devaki, a member of Ugrasena's family, married Vasudeva, she received a large dowry of elephants, horses, chariots, and servants. After the wedding, Kamsa took the reins of the wedding chariot and started to escort the couple home. Along the way, a voice from the sky addressed him. "You foolish king, the eighth son of Devaki will kill you." Kamsa pulled Devaki down by her hair, drew his sword, and prepared to kill her on the spot. But Vasudeva begged for his bride's life and promised to let him kill the eighth child, so that the oracle would not be fulfilled. Kamsa agreed to spare her life, but locked Vasudeva and Devaki in a stone prison. Thereafter he mercilessly killed the first 6 sons of Devaki. Devaki's 7th son miscarried but mystically transferred to the womb of Queen Rohini in Vrindavana. This became Krishna's older brother, Balarama. Soon thereafter, Devaki became pregnant with her 8th child. Krishna was born at the stroke of midnight in his 4-armed Vishnu form, dressed in silk and jewels, carrying the 4 weapons, the conch, disc, club, and lotus. His parents prayed for him to turn himself into an ordinary baby, so they could hide him from Kamsa. The Lord advised Vasudeva to take him to Vrindavana and exchange him with a girl that had just been born there. Then he turned himself into a baby. Magically, the guards in Kamsa's prison fell asleep, and all the iron shackles, chains, and locks automatically opened. Without questioning this, Vasudeva took the child and departed for Vrindavana. Like the story of Moses, the story of Krishna also includes a parting of the waters, allowing Vasudeva to carry Krishna across the Yamuna River to Vrindavana. When Vasudeva reached the house of Nanda, all the cowherds were asleep. Thus he placed his own son on the bed of Yashoda, picked up her newborn girl, and returned to the prison of Kamsa. There was a chance Kamsa would spare the child because the omen said it would be the 8th son that would kill him. Devaki pleaded with him, but Kamsa pulled the baby girl from her arms and dashed her against a stone. The girl slipped from his hands and rose above his head as the 8-armed form of goddess Durga, dressed in fine garments and jewels. She said, The enemy you contemplate is living somewhere else. You are a fool to hurt innocent children. Krishna will kill you. Kamsa became remorseful and begged Devaki and Vasudeva to forgive him for his sins. He released them from their shackles and fell down on their feet crying tears of regret. The next day, however, Kamsa's ministers advised him to give up his sentimental attitude and take action to kill all newborn children in the region. They also advised him to disturb the demigods and saintly people. There is a parallel to this story in the New Testament. When Lord Jesus was born in Bethlehem, Herod killed all newborn children in the area, in what is known as the Massacre of the Innocents. Based on a dream, Joseph took the baby Jesus to Egypt, and returned only after Herod was dead. When Yashoda and Nanda found Krishna as their son, they performed all the religious ceremonies in secret to avoid Kamsa's wrath. The family astrologer, Garga Muni, told the family, "Your son Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. He will protect you from Kamsa's persecutions, and by his grace only, you will surpass all difficulties. Therefore raise him carefully, because many demons will try to attack him." This warning proved true because throughout his childhood, Krishna fought Kamsa's demons, along with all the other demons and jealous and misguided demigods who approached him. Kamsa enlisted a demon named Putana to kill newborn babies. The demon dressed as a beautiful woman and flew on her broom to Krishna's nursery, hoping to kill him with the poison she had smeared on her nipples. Krishna's mother innocently let Putana pick the baby up and put it to her breast. Krishna closed his eyes and sucked out her life air, killing her without taking her poison. When Putana's soul departed, her body returned to its real form, a gigantic witch that smashed trees as it fell, stretching 12 miles across the landscape. Putana's soul attained liberation due to the benevolent act of offering her breast milk to Krishna, and the inhabitants of Vrindavana cremated the body. After Krishna killed Putana, the elder gopis, women of the village, picked him up and performed auspicious rites for his protection and purification. They bathed him and chanted religious mantras to prevent further attacks. Srila Prabhupada explains in Krishna book, the elderly gopis of Vrindavana were so absorbed in affection for Krishna that they wanted to save him, although there was no need to, for he had already protected himself. They could not understand that Krishna was the supreme personality of Godhead playing as a child. Krishna's parents treated children lovingly, celebrating their birthdays and other rites of passage. They acted in a kindly way to correct their children when they got into mischief. For example, sometimes Krishna and Balarama would get into the cowshed, catch the tail of a calf and stand up. The calves would drag them around and they would be covered with mud. Rather than become angry, the mothers would call their friends to watch the fun. Mother Yashoda never hit Krishna, but once tied him to a grinding mortar when he stole butter and fed it to the monkeys. The scriptures explain that as she tried to tie him, the rope was too short. She kept using a longer rope, but it always came up too short. Srila Prabhupada explains that Krishna appreciated the hard labor of his mother, and being compassionate upon her, he agreed to be bound up by the ropes. Krishna tried to crawl, and the mortar stuck between two Arjuna trees in the courtyard. The trees fell and two splendorous demigods emerged and offered prayers to Krishna. Narada Muni cursed had the souls to stand as trees for 100 years, and Krishna freed them. When the boys got a little older, they spent their days playing with the calves in a nearby field. Their mothers cooked the noon meal and called them from the fields, or they would pack lunches for them. Children were considered the wealth of the family and were protected from abuse. However, rather than the parents protecting Krishna, it is the child who protects the village and all the people in it. One day the cowherd boys were playing their games, such as imitating peacocks and running after birds' shadows on the ground, when they came upon a mountain cave. This was actually a demon brother of Putana's, who had expanded himself into an 8-mile-long snake to kill the boys. The opening to the cave was his mouth. The boys felt a hot wind blowing that smelled like fish, or the serpent's intestines. The scriptures say that when the boys walked into the cave, Krishna became momentarily aggrieved because he knew it was one of Kamsa's tricks. He considered for a moment, then decided to enter the cave himself. Demons all over the world became joyful when Krishna went inside. The demigods, who had been hiding among the clouds to see what would happen, became distressed. For a time it seemed as if the snake demon had killed Krishna, but when Krishna heard the demigods' pleas, he grew larger and choked the demon to death. Aghasura's life air burst through a hole in his skull and waited there for Krishna to come out. Then it merged into his body. Krishna showed his benevolent nature by rescuing his friends and giving liberation to Aghasura. When Aghasura died, the demigods offered prayers, threw flowers, and beat drums. Hearing the commotion, Lord Brahma arrived on the scene. At that time, Brahma kidnapped the children, an offense unbecoming of a demigod. Krishna was unhappy because due to Brahma's misdeed, because he would have to go back to the village alone. Instead, he decided to expand himself into substitute boys and calves that looked exactly like the originals, and he returned to the village with them. No one could tell the difference, but families showed increased spontaneous affection to their sons, who were actually expansions of God. Balarama, Krishna's brother, noticed the parents' behavior and asked Krishna what was going on. Krishna explained how Lord Brahma had kidnapped the real boys and calves. Brahma made a mistake in trying to test Krishna's power. Life went on like this for a year before Brahma returned. Brahma's time passes much more quickly, so it seemed to him only a moment. However, when he returned, he was shocked to see the boys and calves playing with Krishna, as though nothing had happened. Krishna knew Brahma was perplexed, so he transformed all the boys and calves into 4-armed Vishnu forms. Brahma heard music and saw many Brahmas, Shivas, demigods, and Jivas, souls singing God's names and dancing. Brahma's mind opened at first to the vision, but then he became bewildered, so Krishna ended the dazzling scene. When Brahma woke up, he realized that he was face to face with Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who was enacting his eternal pastimes as a cowherd boy in the spiritual land of Vrindavana. Brahma immediately got down from his swan carrier and fell prostrate at Krishna's feet to beg forgiveness. After offering glorious prayers and penance for his behavior, Brahma circumambulated Krishna 3 times and returned to his planet. Exactly 1 year before, Krishna had left his friends eating lunch on the bank of the Yamuna River. When he returned, they had just begun the meal, and thought Krishna had only been gone for a second. None of the boys realized that a whole year had gone by and that they had been kidnapped to sleep in a cave. When the children returned to their homes and told their parents about the Aghasura demon, the demon's corpse had decomposed, so the parents thought it was just a wild tale from the children's imagination. Vishnu in his many forms is an icon of protection, and Krishna was, among other things, an avatar incarnation of Vishnu. It is said that the residents of Vrindavana were sometimes aware of this and at times depended on Krishna to protect them. A good example was when Krishna lifted Govardhana hill. Every year the residents of Vrindavana worshipped Lord Indra for supplying rain. One year when Krishna was a youth, he asked Nanda to worship Govardhana hill instead of Indra. Krishna argued, "We do not derive any special benefit from Indra. Our specific relationship is with Govardhana hill and Vrindavana forest. Let us have nothing to do with Indra." King Nanda finally agreed with Krishna and prepared to offer the sacrifice to Govardhana hill. This made Lord Indra angry and jealous. Forgetting the divine position of Krishna, Indra reasoned, "These cowherd men in Vrindavana have neglected my authority on the advice of this talkative boy, who is known as Krishna. He is nothing but a child, and by believing this child, they have enraged me." Krishna Book, Pyre 174. Indra then sent a storm to devastate Vrindavana. All the people and animals came to Krishna for shelter, and in a miraculous show of strength, Krishna lifted Govardhana hill with one finger to make the mountain into a huge umbrella. Everyone crowded underneath it and remained safe until the rain stopped. Later, Lord Indra realized his mistake in attacking Krishna and apologized. This is an example of one of the demigods behaving like a demon. Krishna Book explains, Indra became angry because he thought that he was all in all within this universe, and that no one was as powerful as he. Kamsa's demons harassed children throughout the region for 15 years. Magically, Krishna and Balarama killed them all as part of their divine play, or Lila. Thus, the inhabitants of Vrindavana were thankful, remembering their guru's prediction about Krishna. After Krishna killed the Arista, bull demon, the great sage Narada Muni went to Kamsa's palace and told him that Krishna and Balarama were the 7th and 8th sons of Vasudeva. Narada described the events that took place on the night of Krishna's birth and confirmed that Kamsa would meet his death at Krishna's hands. On hearing this news, Kamsa imprisoned Devaki and Vasudeva again and renewed his vow to kill Krishna and Balarama. He called for the Keshi demon and other great demons, and just in case that didn't work, he planned to draw the boys into a wrestling match with 2 of his strongest wrestlers. He sent his servant Akrura to bring the boys back to Mathura. This would be Krishna and Balarama's transition into adulthood, because they never again returned to the light-hearted pastimes of their youth, playing in the pastures or dancing with the young gopis. Kamsa was delirious with fear, waiting for Krishna to arrive, and unable to sleep through the night because of bad dreams. He saw his headless body in a mirror. Everything appeared double, and he saw the covering of the sky as pierced. He saw holes in his shadow and left no footprints when he walked. Krishna and Balarama entered the splendorous city with their friends. By and by they came to the wrestling ring and accepted the challenge to fight Kamsa's demons. After fighting for a few moments, Krishna and Balarama easily killed their opponents. Everyone except Kamsa rejoiced at the wonderful defeat. The evil king stopped the celebration and shouted, "Drive the 2 wicked sons of Vasudeva out of the city. Confiscate the cowherd's property and arrest that evil man Nanda. Kill that ill-motivated Vasudeva. Also kill my father, Ugrasena, along with his followers, who have sided with our enemies." Krishna jumped into the stands, seized Kamsa, knocked off his crown and dragged him to the wrestling mat by his hair. There he easily killed Kamsa, striking him with his fist. Kamsa's 8 younger brothers attacked Krishna and Balarama, but Balarama easily killed them with his club. Krishna and Balarama met their parents, but Devaki and Vasudeva were struck with awe seeing the prophecy fulfilled, and because of a feeling of reverence, they were afraid to embrace their sons. After that incident, Krishna and Balarama entered the Gurukula and became princes in the court of Yadu. In the time of Krishna, the blind king Dhritarashtra headed the lunar dynasty in Hastinapur. His wife Queen Gandhari had 100 sons called the Kauravas, the oldest of whom was Duryodhana. Also in the royal palace were grandfather Bhisma, the king's uncle, and Queen Kunti and her 5 sons. Kunti's late husband Pandu was king, Dhritarashtra's brother, so the Kauravas were her nephews. Krishna was also Kunti's nephew, because her brother Vasudeva was Krishna's father. She grew up away from her family, in the palace of Kuntibhoja, her cousin. When she was a child, Kunti had pleased the powerful sage Durvasa Muni, who gave her a mantra that would allow her to conceive 5 sons from the demigods. She tested the mantra, and the sun god gave her Karna, whom she secretly set afloat in a river. Karna grew up to become a great warrior for the Kauravas, and Kunti later revealed that she was his real mother. When Kunti married Pandu, she used the mantra to have 3 more sons, Yudhishthira, Bhima, and Arjuna. Pandu was cursed to die if he ever tried to have sex with his wives, so he was glad Kunti could obtain sons from the demigods. He asked her to give the last chance to his other wife Madri, who subsequently had twins, Nakula and Sahadev. These 5 children were the Pandava brothers. Eventually, Pandu attempted to have sex with Madri and immediately died from the curse. Madri killed herself in the funeral pyre, but Kunti lived on to care for the children. She and her sons moved into the palace of Dhritarashtra, provoking scorn and jealousy among the 100 Kauravas. Her son Bhima caused problems with the other children because he was a bully. In retaliation, the Kaurava brothers once tied him up and threw him in the ocean, but Bhima returned with added siddhis, yogic powers, annoying them all the more. At this time, grandfather Bhisma enrolled the Pandava and Kaurava brothers in archery, training under the renowned archer, Drona. At the end of their lessons, Arjuna ranked first place in Drona's tests, and this was another factor to incite jealousy in the Kauravas. As a final request to his students, Guru Dakshine, Drona asked them to arrest a neighboring king, Drupada, and bring him there for justice. The Kauravas failed, but Arjuna succeeded, increasing the Pandavas' status. When their training as princes ended, Dhritarashtra acknowledged Yudhishthira, Kunti's oldest son, as the heir apparent to the throne. Dhritarashtra's move was an indirect insult to his oldest son, Duryodhana, whom he considered a buffoon. This angered the Kauravas and moved the family deeper into conflict that would eventually erupt in the devastating war, which was the basis of the most fundamental books of the Hindu religion, Mahabharata and Bhagavad Gita. Feeling angry and jealous of the Pandavas, Duryodhana made a plan to kill them. On a family pilgrimage, he built a house of lac for them, and then his servants set it on fire. The Kauravas thought the Pandavas were dead, but they had escaped through an underground tunnel and lived anonymously in the forest for a time. Finally, they heard about an engagement contest, Svayamvara, for the hand of the princess of Panchali, Drupadi, and went there in disguise. The object of the Svayamvara was that the contestants had to string a heavy bow and shoot 5 arrows into the eye of a fish that was dangling on a target in a courtyard. Many princes had gathered, including the Kauravas, but Arjuna won the competition and brought Draupadi back to the forest retreat with him. The other princes were unhappy at losing Draupadi, but Krishna reasoned with them in Arjuna's favor. When they arrived home with Draupadi, Arjuna told his mother that he had won a great prize that day. Without knowing what it was, Kunti instructed her sons to divide it equally among themselves, and thus they all shared Draupadi as their bride. Everyone was joyful to find the Pandavas still alive and married into a prominent ruling family, and so King Dhritarashtra invited them to come back to Hastinapura and told his sons to give Yudhishthira half the kingdom. Yudhishthira built his palace and lived peacefully with his brothers, Draupadi and their other wives. On the occasion of a solar eclipse, all the royal families traveled to Kurukshetra to observe religious rites. Kurukshetra would later become the battlefield for the Great War, but for now it was known only as a holy place of pilgrimage. In a previous millennium, Parasurama, an ancient incarnation of God, had killed thousands of evil military kings there, and their blood formed a river at that spot. When the royal families met their relations in Kurukshetra, there were great exchanges of love. The Krishna book describes, meeting after long separation, they were all jubilant, their hearts were throbbing, and their faces appeared like freshly bloomed lotus flowers. There were drops of tears falling from their eyes. The hair on their bodies stood on end, and because of their extreme ecstasy, they were temporarily speechless. At this meeting, Vasudeva and Kunti, who were brother and sister, lamented their long separation. Kunti complained about all she had been through due to Duryodhana. Vasudeva reminded her that he loved her and would have been there to help, except that his life was also miserable due to Kamsa's persecutions. Krishna and Balarama met the residents of Vrindavana and renewed their relationships with their foster parents, Nanda, Yashoda, and Rohini, and the gopis, cowherd girls. The gopis were especially pleased to see Krishna again, since he had never fulfilled his promise to return to Vrindavana. While Krishna and Balarama met their childhood friends, Krishna's parents from Vrindavana met with Vasudeva and Devaki. Vasudeva finally disclosed to Nanda the events surrounding Krishna's birth, and they both felt grateful for their fate, having Krishna as their son. While Nanda and Yashoda sometimes thought of Krishna as their ordinary child, Vasudeva and Devaki had always remained conscious of Krishna's divinity. Duryodhana remained angry at the Pandavas and wanted to drive them from the kingdom. He challenged Yudhishthira to a game of dice in which Yudhishthira lost everything, including his brothers, Draupadi, and himself. The Kauravas brought Draupadi to the arena to strip off her sari and humiliate her, but she prayed to Krishna, and he mystically supplied an unending length of cloth. King Dhritarashtra came on the scene and gave everything back to the Pandavas, and sent them home. Soon after that, despite warnings and protests from all sides, Duryodhana convinced Yudhishthira to play dice again, and Yudhishthira lost again. Thus, to satisfy the terms of the wager, Kunti, the Pandavas, and Draupadi went to the forest for 12 years, and spent the additional year incognito. The Pandavas migrated as far north as Badrikashram in the Himalayas for some years, then back to neighboring regions. Toward the end of their exile, the fighting between the Pandavas and Kauravas heated up again. Duryodhana and his men occasionally visited the Pandavas in the forest to pick fights. Another mortal enemy, Jayadrath, kidnapped Draupadi, but the Pandavas rescued her. After satisfying the conditions of the dice game by living in exile, the Pandavas returned to Hastinapura to reclaim their kingdom, but Duryodhana refused to give them even a pinpoint of land. The situation between the Kauravas and Pandavas grew extremely tense. Krishna tried to make peace between the parties, but a war was destined to take place on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. Krishna became Arjuna's chariot driver and spoke the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna when the armies drew up to begin fighting. After 18 days, the war was over. All the great heroes of the Kaurava dynasty, along with millions of soldiers, lay dead on the battlefield. Only the Pandavas and a small handful of others remained. Asvatthama, one of the remaining warriors, killed Draupadi's children in their sleep, hoping to end the royal lineage. Even though Prince Duryodhana wanted to find some last revenge, he was appalled by this atrocity and died of grief. The Pandavas arrested Asvatthama and brought him before Draupadi, but out of compassion she pleaded for his life. The shameless Asvatthama made one more attempt to kill the remaining heir, an unborn grandson in the womb of Uttara, Arjuna's wife. He hurled a Brahmastra, nuclear weapon, at Uttara, and when she saw the missile coming toward her, she ran to Krishna for protection. Krishna, who was preparing to leave for his own kingdom, defeated the missile with his Sudarshan chakra. The child Pariksit grew up to inherit the kingdom. When Gandhari came to Kurukshetra and saw the corpses of her sons scattered on the battlefield, she blamed Krishna for everything. She cursed him that in 36 years he would also lose everything and die, so that the women in his family would cry, just as she was crying. Then King Dhritarashtra, Gandhari, Kunti, and their gurus Vidura and Sanjaya left for the forest. The Pandavas lived in grief due to separation from their relatives. After 6 years, Yudhishthira saw his mother in a dream, and they all went to the forest to see her. They took Vyasa, a sage and grandfather in the family, with them. Gandhari and Kunti told Vyasa they wanted to see their dead relatives. Vyasa advised them to dip into the Ganges, which they did, and when they came out they saw Karna, Duryodhana, and all the others standing on the bank of the river. Even the blind king Dhritarashtra saw the vision. After the Pandavas returned to Hastinapura, 2 days later a forest fire killed Dhritarashtra, Kunti, and Gandhari. Yudhishthira had become king after the Great War, but reigned for only a few years, before the family crowned Pariksit, Arjuna's son, as king. The Pandavas and Draupadi left their material engagements to prepare for the end of life, Mahaprasthana. They departed for the Himalayas mountains where heaven is, walking in a line with Yudhishthira first, then the other brothers, Draupadi, and finally Yudhishthira's dog. As they climbed the mountains, first Draupadi died, then each of the brothers died until finally Yudhishthira reached the gates of heaven, followed only by the dog. Lord Indra was there to meet him. When Yudhishthira realized that his brothers and wife were dead, he didn't want to go into heaven alone. But Indra said the others were already there waiting for him. Thus Yudhishthira and the dog entered heaven with Lord Indra. Along with the curse of Gandhari, another curse befell Krishna's dynasty that contributed to its annihilation. Once some of Krishna's sons were playing around, and they dressed Samba as a pregnant woman and brought him before some visiting sages Visvamitra, Kanva and Narada Muni. In jest, they asked the sages to predict what kind of child Samba would give birth to. Insulted, the sages said he would give birth to an iron rod that would become the instrument to fulfill the prophecy of their dynasty's demise. Fearful and repentant, the boys asked Krishna what to do. But Krishna acknowledged the curse and said, "It was meant to be." When Samba delivered an iron rod the next day, the Yadavas, Krishna's sons, filed it into powder and threw it into the sea. Krishna enforced a prohibition on liquor in Dvaraka, hoping to avoid what was destined to come. Still evil omens began. Rats multiplied and attacked humans in their sleep, sheep howled like jackals, asses were born from cows, and cats from mules. Krishna's Sudarshan chakra weapon disappeared into the sky. Eventually, the powder from the iron rod washed up on the shore and grew into arrow-like grass. The Yadavas became drunk and used the rods to kill each other. Even Krishna beat people out of anger. In this fratricidal war, all the descendants of Krishna killed each other. Krishna sent his messenger Durga to Hastinapura to inform Arjuna of the demise of the Yadava race, then consoled the women in the palace. He told his wives that Arjuna would take care of them and left for the forest. Krishna's brother Balarama sat down under a tree, and his life air came out of his mouth like a white serpent and entered the sea. Krishna roamed the forest for some time, then sat down to meditate. When a hunter named Jara came by, he mistook Krishna for a deer and shot an arrow into his foot. Krishna died at once and his spirit rose into heaven. Arjuna cremated Krishna, and several of his principal queens died in the funeral pyre after him. Arjuna left for Hastinapura with the remaining wives, but on the way, forest dwellers attacked and the women dove into the Sarasvati River and died to escape. Philosophers and scholars of the time knew that the death of Krishna marked the beginning of Kali Yuga, the present age of degradation. Thus, to preserve this heritage and the stories of Krishna for future generations, they held a convention in the forest of Naimisharanya. The sages discussed all these stories, and Vyasa, one of the sages present, later wrote everything down in what is now the Srimad Bhagavatam.